Hi! Today we're returning to the big storybook for children with a story called The Miller Boy and the Cat. There was once an old miller who had neither wife nor children. 3 young apprentice boys helped the miller to run the mill. One day the miller realized that he was growing old and soon would have to stop working altogether. He intended to leave his mill to one of his apprentices, and so he devised a test to discover which boy was most fitted to be given the mill. "I want each of you to go out into the world," he said, "and bring me back a horse. The boy who brings back the best horse shall have the mill." The 3 boys set off together, but Jan and Peter decided that young Hans walked too slowly for them, and that night, as Hans lay sleeping soundly in a cave, the 2 elder boys crept out and ran swiftly out into the darkness. Hans was very surprised to find himself alone when he awoke the next morning. But being a quick-witted lad, he realized that now he had only himself to rely on and must find a horse as best he could. He washed in a nearby stream, ate the last of his bread and cheese, sharing the crumbs with his feathered friends, and set off once more on his way. As he passed through a small wood, Hans saw a pretty black and white cat gazing down at him with bright green eyes from the branches of a tall tree. "Hello, Puss," said Hans, as he passed behind the tree. "Good day to you, Hans," replied the cat in a soft, sweet voice, causing Hans to open his mouth in utter excitement, unable to believe his ears at hearing a cat speak. "As you can see," went on the cat calmly, "I am no ordinary cat. I know all about your quest. If you will work for me for a year and a day, I will give you a horse." Hans thought about this offer for a long time, and then he agreed to the suggestion. Hans followed the cat through the wood until they reached a fine house standing in a clearing. "You need not start work until tomorrow," said the cat graciously. "Until then, my servants will feed, clothe, and entertain you." Before Hans could stammer out his thanks, the cat disappeared, and a number of even smaller kittens appeared, who quickly prepared a sumptuous feast for Hans, which the youth thoroughly enjoyed. As he dined, the kittens played various instruments, filling the room with sweet music. Later, the kittens showed Hans to bed, lighting his way with many candles. After wishing him sweet dreams, they scampered away upstairs into the attics. In the morning, after Hans had eaten a hearty breakfast, the cat appeared once again. She gave Hans a sharp axe, a silver saw, and a copper mallet, and she asked Hans to cut up some logs into small pieces. Day after day, Hans chopped up the wood, seeing no one but the pretty cat and her kitten servants. Then, one day, the cat gave Hans a silver scythe and a golden pitchfork. "It is time to go in the meadows to cut the hay," she said. "Remember, Hans, horses like hay." "Indeed they do," agreed Hans. He was pleased that the cat had mentioned horses. He hoped it would remind her that she had promised Hans a horse if he worked well. But summer passed with Hans working hard in the fields, and the cat never once mentioned giving him a horse. Hans did everything the cat asked of him, and then finally, taking his courage into both hands, he said, "Mistress Cat, when are you going to give me the horse you promised me?" "Soon, Hans, soon. You only have to build me a little house and a horse shall be yours." Happy that this was to be his last task, Hans set to work to build a good, sturdy little house with stout walls and weatherproof roof, clear, shining windows, and even a little garden containing a dovecote and a little pool. The kitten servants helped him all they could, fetching and carrying materials, and when it was finished, Hans was truly pleased with his work. And so was the cat when she came to see it. Her green eyes gleamed with pleasure, and she gave a contented little purr. "You have done well, Hans," she cried. "Now it is time for you to come and see the horses in my stable." Hans and the cat walked over to the stable, and his eyes opened in amazement and delight at the 12 wonderful horses there, each one as beautiful as the next. "Is one of these mine?" asked Hans eagerly. But the cat refused to give him a definite answer. "Go back to the mill, and in 3 days you will get your reward," she said, as she fed and watered the horses. And with this, Hans had to be content. As he walked into the mill yard, poor Hans felt very sad. He was returning without a horse and in the same clothes he had worn on the day he left. He was tired, dirty, and hungry, and as he approached the door, he saw Jan and Peter talking to the miller. When they saw Hans, the other apprentices called out, "Where's your horse?" "It will be here tomorrow," said Hans, but he was beginning to have doubts about the cat's promise. "It must be a fine horse if it can find its way here alone," scoffed Peter. "'Tis true that my horse is lame and Jan's horse is blind, but at least we have a horse." "Aye, and Jan and Peter are both decently clad," cried the miller. "For shame, Hans, you look so dirty. You are too shabby to sleep in my clean mill. You must share the shed with the geese tonight, and tomorrow I shall make my choice as to who shall have the mill." And so poor Hans was forced to spend the night on a bed of straw among the geese. Next morning he was awakened by a knock on the door of the shed. Outside stood a footman with a basket of clothes. "Put these on and come outside," he ordered. After a hasty wash, Hans donned the elegant clothes and soft leather shoes and hurried outside. The miller was helping a beautiful maiden out of a coach while Jan and Peter gazed at the magnificent horse a footman was holding. "Here is your horse," cried the maiden. "It will win you the mill, but if you wish, you can return with me to my home." Overcome with the maiden's beauty, Hans stammered, "But who are you?" "Don't you recognize me?" she replied, her bright green eyes bright with laughter. "I am the cat you met in the wood. A wicked fairy changed me into a cat until a young man served me without complaining for a year and a day. Now I am restored to my true form as the Princess Melisande, and I am free to marry whomever I wish." Hans was overjoyed at the princess's words, for he loved her immediately when he had set his eyes upon her. "You may have the horse," he told the miller, said Jan, "and Jan and Peter shall share the mill, but I shall seek out the king and ask him to let me marry his daughter, and we shall live in the little house that I built for her." The king readily agreed to the marriage, but Hans wondered why the princess smiled as they set off to the little house in the wood. She refused to tell him, but her green eyes twinkled with laughter. "You will soon see," she teased him. And when they arrived at the place in the wood where Hans had built the house, there stood a magnificent palace, with fountains playing in the garden and carpets of pretty flowers everywhere. They were greeted by their servants, the kittens, now happily restored to human form once more, who welcomed Hans and his princess most warmly. So the years passed happily, and when children were born to the young couple, Hans often told the boys and girls about the day he went in search of a horse, and how instead he met a talking cat and won for himself a royal bride.